Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Othering and Belonging Institute's panel conversation, an event honoring the 70th anniversary of the historic Bandung Conference. We'll be dropping a link to the song we were just playing, Latino America, an anthemic song celebrating Latin American culture and identity. And it's considered a significant cultural performance as it touches on many underlying historical, social, and political themes present throughout Latin America and the Global South, hence why we thought it fitting to open the conversation today. I'll also add that the song is written and produced by Argentine Rafael Arcuate and the Puerto Rican hip-hop group Calle 13 and features Venezuelan music director Gustavo Dudamel, who conducted the performance with the Orquesta Sinfónica Simón Bolívar. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Basima Sizemore, and I'm a senior researcher in the Global Justice Program at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event titled Views from the Global South, the Legacy of the Bandung Conference and the Vision of Worldmaking. Today's panel is in recognition of the 70th anniversary of the 1955 Bandung Conference, a historic meeting of 29 Asian and African nations that challenged the consequences of European colonialism and that laid the groundwork for a more equitable global order to assert the Global South's position on the international stage. We have an excellent opportunity today to engage with scholars from the Global South to discuss the legacy of the Bandung Conference, to help us draw connections and unite our history with our present, as well as to imagine a future where everyone and everything belongs. This event is the second activity of the Global South Lab, a new area of work at the Othering and Belonging Institute. And the Global South Lab, in its full title, is the Global South Lab, Past, Present, and Future of Worldmaking, is a platform for engaging with Global South social actors and institutions. It is dedicated to unearthing the wealth of Global South experiences, perspectives, and visions. And we aim to foster mutual understanding, respect, and deeper bridging that will help improve people's lives and preserve our planet. We acknowledge this type of engagement with the Global South to be absolutely critical and necessary, as around 85% of the world's population lives in the Global South. And the term the Global South is not merely a geographical location, but a global project. The Global South has unmatched social and natural diversity and varying degrees of economic and human development and governance systems. However, imperial, colonial, and neo-colonial actors have long ignored the Global South, concealed its knowledge, and deliberately marginalized its visions. Through the lab, we will partner with social actors, institutions, and movements across the Global South to bring together a wide range of perspectives and visions from the Global South to engage with global citizens, both in the South and the North, on contemporary challenges and to build common strategies that envision a future of belonging for all. So there's lots to come with this area of work, such as future opportunities for engagement and learnings like the event we're hosting today, developing new narratives and narrative strategies, and incubating collaborations with social actors and civic institutions throughout the Global South. So do keep an eye out on our new website that we will continue to add content to and announce activities on the lab's new website, which can be found at the Othering and Belonging Institute. As I wrap up this introduction, I'll add a quick note on housekeeping, and that following the hour-long conversation facilitated by our moderator with our speakers, we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A from the audience. So as questions come to you, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll also send reminders, but please do share your questions. We'll have 15 minutes for the speakers to respond to them, and hopefully we'll get through all of them. And again, thanks for joining us today. With that, I'd like to transition to our conversation with our speakers, and I'll start by introducing our moderator for today's session, my dear colleague Ilsadik El-Sheikh. Ilsadik El-Sheikh is the director of the Global Justice Program at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. Ilsadik's intellectual formation is deeply interdisciplinary and transnational, having been educated in Arabic, Greek, and English in political science, political economy, and political thought. His research interests span both local and global structures, the intersections of encounters between the Global South and the Global North, in areas such as polity, geopolitics, and global governments. He also leads our Global South Lab at the Other and Belonging Institute. Welcome, El-Sadiq.
Thank you, Basima. Hello, everybody. Very pleased to be here with all of you. Indeed, as Basima mentioned, Bandung Conference is not just a conference of a head of states, but it's really put a lasting legacy in the way in which people of the Global South imagine a new world. So the legacy of Bandung not only offers us framework for discussing and shaping the concept of decolonial existence, but is on mutual prosperity, but also give us a blueprint of a new world order. It intervenes in a legal framework and articulates decolonial, cultural, economic, and political cooperation among those countries that joined at that time between April 18th and April 24 in 1955 in Bandung, Indonesia. But it's also the spirit of what it comes out of the Bandung Conference present us with a radical, more humane vision of a world where all nations could peacefully coexist. This vision is rooted in the principle of respecting national sovereignty, promoting cooperation, advocating for non-interference, and laying the foundation for a better future where everyone and everything belong. And remembering 70 years of Bandung, I think we needed it, that spirit around us, especially in this difficult time. So with that being said, let me introduce the fantastic panelists that we have today, who will shed more light on the Bandung Conference and its legacy around the globe. Coming to us from Brazil, but currently in somewhere in Central Europe, Fabia Fernandes Carvalho is a lecturer in international law at FCV Sao Paulo Law School in Brazil. Her research examines the history of international law in Latin America with a focus on the principle of non-intervention and regional perspectives on international law. She is currently a member of the editorial collective of the Third World Approaches to International Law Review, managing editor of the World Comparative Law Journal, and a member of the board of editors of the recently launched Latin American and Caribbean Journal of International Law. Next, we have May Taha. May is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Her research examines the various scales of revolution that reveal historical tension within workers' movements, feminist movements, and anti-colonial liberation movements. She has written on law, colonialism, labor movement, class and gender relation, and social reproductions in the Middle East. May is working on a book project that focuses on anti-colonial sound, exploring the role of radio in liberation struggle across Africa and the Middle East from the 1950s to the 1990s. The project draw out different map of solidarity and internationalism. Next, we have Weldon Sana Utma. Weldon is a scholar of modern international and transnational history at the University of Gadjah Mada in Indonesia, with an interest in history of the connection between Indonesia and the Afro-Asian world in the 20th century. Weldon's first book, Vision for the Future, and an intellectual history of the 1955 Bandung Conference, examines the global history of the Bandung Conference and its legacy in international politics. In 2018, the Indonesian newspaper Jakarta Globe selected his book as one of the 30 books that help you to understand the Southeast Asia giant, which is Indonesia. Weldon's latest article, written with Solin Luis, and can be found in Solin Luis and Nana Osi Obre edited book, Socialism, Internationalism, and Development in the Third World. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. I know it's a really hassle to try to coordinate the time across all this time, especially for you, Weldon, staying up late. I think it's maybe 11 p.m. In Java, right? But thank you so much. I'm really happy we host you here today to have this lively conversation with you all. So let me just get into it. So I will try to mix the order, but first I will start with Weldon. A question for you. So just to situate us in this context of today's panel, can you briefly tell us what is the 1955 Bandung Conference? What it was, where it happened?
Okay, thank you so much, Sadiq. And first of all, I would like to thank the Othering and Belonging Institute, UC Berkeley, especially Al Sadiq, for inviting me to participate in these discussions. So it's an honor for me, although it's also a challenge, like previously Sadiq said, because the discussions is taking place in the midnight in Jakarta time. So now it's 17 p.m. in Jakarta. So the Bandung Conference was an international conference of Asians and African countries held in Bandung, Indonesia in April 1955, which had significance for the history of the Third World in particular and world history in general. So the conference was officially named the Asian African Conference, but in academic discourse and activism, it is better known as the Bandung Conference. So the conference was first proposed by the Indonesian Prime Minister Ali Sastro Amijoyo at the Colombo Conference in 1954, after also discussing this possibility of this idea with President Sukarno of Indonesia. So Ali Sastro Amijoyo argued that Asian and African cooperation is possible despite Asia and Africa had many differences, but they shared a common historical background, having been colonized under European colonialism. And Sastro Amijoyo was also convinced that Asia and Africa had the same views on independence, sovereignty, and peace for the world. In my opinion, this view cannot be separated from the global context and the sharpness in capturing the global reality at the time. So the four other Asian countries that attended the Colombo Conference, India, Sri Lanka, Burma, and Pakistan, accepted this idea, although with some hesitations about whether such a conference could actually be held. However, due to pressing and urgent global situations, they agreed that Asia and Africa should take a stance in international politics. So the emergence of the Bandung Conference cannot be separated from socio-political conditions of Asia and Africa and the world that enable Bandung to emerge in the mid-20th century. So many Asian countries are already independent, and Africa is still striving for its independence. However, Asia and Africa shared the same views on anti-colonial nationalism, the need for post-colonial decolonizations, and the belief that peace cannot be created in a world where colonialism has not been abolished completely. So in addition, the global situations at the time was also filled with uncertainty and fear because the threat of war, nuclear threats, as well as Cold War interference in the national sovereignty of the third world countries. So therefore, the emergence of Bandung Conference was underpinned by strong foundations of aspirations for national liberations, sovereignty, decolonizations, peace, and anti-colonial solidarity, deeply rooted in the peoples of Asia and Africa. And the Bandung Conference is a landmark for the history of anti-colonialism, decolonizations, and peace. Why? First of all, I think because Bandung was the first meeting of the independent and nearly independent countries of Asia and Africa held on their own soil in the post-war era. Before that, it's not safe for them to gather together in their own soil, but it's more safe for them to convene in the European cities. But more importantly, in my perspective, Bandung marked the formations of unprecedented form of intercontinental cooperations, that is Afro-Asian cooperations. So Bandung gave rise to Afro-Asia as a new collective force, which was later interpreted as the birth of the idea of the third world and the beginning of an era called the Bandung moment or the Bandung era. So this Afro-Asian solidarity and cooperation then inspired the peoples of Asia and Africa to build new transnational cooperations under the banner of Afro-Asianism that committed to building a more just world. And the second point, I think the Bandung Conference was a landmark because the Asian and African countries dared to take a stand, voicing their aspirations on the national and international problems they face. So Asia and Africa choose not to remain silent as spectators watching global injustice like colonialism and imperialism, whose the most devastating impacts were felt by their people. So Asia and Africa themselves have a strong sense of belonging, that they were part of the world, and they also have the right and responsibility to shape an even better world. That is why Richard Wright wrote in his brilliant first-hand report that Bandung was a human race speaking. So third, Bandung is considered important, a landmark for history of decolonizations, anti-imperialism, and peace, because it was in Bandung that a vision of an alternative world was imagined. So the Asian and African leaders in Bandung criticized the old world order that perpetuated Western dominance over the third world. So they emphasized the need for a breakthrough to dismantle such a system and to rearrange a world order based on the aspirations of independence, sovereignty, equality, and peace. So Bandung represented a world-making effort by Asian and African leaders towards a more humanist, post-imperial world. So that is my opening of discussions.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well done. I really love the framework of human race speaking, and it's really critical for us to remember that in reality there is an alternative way of living in this world, but we just have maybe to listen to the marginalized, to the periphery. Thank you for your offering. Now I will turn to May with what Weldon offered us as a kind of very quick historical background about Bandung. Why do you think it is necessary for us to commemorate or to remember the legacy of Bandung today?
Thank you again. Just to kind of echo what Weldon was saying, thank you so much, Sadiq and Basima, for organizing this and bringing us all together. So just to kind of go back to Sadiq's question. So as mentioned in the introduction and also in Weldon's intervention just now, Bandung was an important historical moment that marked a change in the colonial state system that had dominated Africa and Asia And I think it captured the spirit of Afro-Asian solidarity with liberation struggles fighting against colonialism. It also birthed a project that is not simply a geographical location, but it initiated the politics of what we now call third worldism, a project that sought not only to center colonialism as, you know, an important question to contend with globally, but that also had emancipatory and largely socialist aspirations in its different forms. So I think returning to Bandung and other projects, such as the Tricontinental, for example, reminds us that solidarity is not simply felt or stated. So we say, like, I am in solidarity with this and that struggle, which is fine. But solidarity, in the way we understand it in that historical moment, is actually enacted in and through struggle. So in that sense, remembering Bandung has an urgency today. It's not simply an intellectual or a historical exercise. I think returning to those moments in history is many of the times is about searching for an opening in time, a moment from which to seek refuge. It's about seizing the memory of anti-colonial revolution as it flashes onto us today in a moment of danger. And I'm thinking here of the language of Walter Benjamin, but it flashes up and forces itself on a present that is unfortunately still mired in the violence of colonial capitalism. But I think the task of critical history is not simply to return to these moments to inspire the present, but its task is also to interrogate the past, to probe its afterlives and failures. And on some level, one approaches this moment or the years of Afro-Asian solidarity from a defeated present that looks upon history to try and reassemble more revolutionary possibilities, even if those possibilities are unsettled or blurry. The question is how to think of other tools to approach this period, to disrupt it, and in the process, maybe emancipate it from the weights of the dead. And I also think, you know, it is important to critically read the politics of this moment of Afro-Asian solidarity from 1955 onwards, and to specifically ask what Afro-Asian does and did not mean. So Afro-Asian, I think, should not mean some kind of racial, ethnic, or cultural essentialism. Important thing to note is that this assembly was brought together by a political orientation against their common experience of colonialism and capitalism, or perhaps how capitalism manifested itself differently in the colonies. But there's nothing essential about this grouping of Africans and Asians. It is easy to approach such projects from a particularistic standpoint, but it's important to bring about the legacy of Bandung as a legacy of anti-colonial struggle rather than that of a particular identity, for example. And I think this is very important for us today when we're thinking about the legacy of Bandung to try to draw out lessons towards an internationalism that is cognizant of how colonial capitalism articulates itself differently in different places. And maybe I'll divert a little bit, although not too far from Bandung, to the pages of Lotus, which is the Afro-Asian cultural and political magazine that was published from 1968 to 1991. Some of you might have heard of it. And those pages, you see the articulation of some of the anti-colonial ideas we're talking about around the meaning of internationalism at the time of national liberation. And internationalist solidarity was a formative element of national liberation. And here I'm following Ziad Nabulsi and quoting directly from him, who has written impressively on the Lotus magazine. And he says, on this view, to be a Palestinian, an Indonesian, or an Angolan was to express internationalist solidarity with all of the oppressed peoples of the world, and to act on this expression in concrete political and social terms. In other words, the identity conditions for being a Palestinian, for example, included being an internationalist, What is significant here is that internationalism is not conceived of as existing in an antithetical relation to nationalism at the time, but international solidarity is not understood in terms of a demand to transcend the nation. Rather, it's a requirement for being more firmly rooted in it, close quote. So in that sense, if one failed to be an internationalist in thought and practice, then they failed to be a Palestinian in the proper sense. Importantly, I think this internationalist sensibility was manifested in a socialist imaginary for a world freed from a class society, one that was historically connected to the exploitation of the colonies. And indeed, one could draw immense inspiration for us today from going through the pages of Lotus and seeing the vast cultural and intellectual and political production that was produced by Afro-Asian writers, and that captured this moment in history, the years inaugurated by the Bandung Conference, but actually, more accurately, inaugurated by anti-colonial struggles across the African and Asian continents.
Wow, May, thank you so much for offering that, and I can see why remembering Bandung is not just merely a nostalgic issue or issues about, like, ethnic or racial identity, but it's rather is a political identity that should be grounded and is grounded in anti-colonial struggle, that maybe colonialism physically ceased to exist, but neocoloniality and neocolonialism is still thrive and well, and at times even in the mind of the local elite. And I see the connection you're making, that this could help us actually discover or repurpose new tools for the struggle to achieve the world that we wanted to see. So now let me turn to Fabia. Fabia, can you speak about how Bandung has influenced today global governance, despite all the efforts that be made by powerful actors to marginalize it?
Hello, everyone. I also wanted to start by thanking El Zadig and Basimas for the invitation to be here. It's also really nice to be part of this panel with Wildan and May. So great conversation. I'm also super happy to be part of it. So I wanted to start by saying that I will approach the main topic of our conversation from the perspective of international law. So thinking of the Bandung Conference, its legacy, its impact on global governance, considering how central international law was and has been to this new perspective of a new world making, even an attempt to have a new international law. So in terms of the impact of on today's global governance, I think one aspect that is really interesting to mention is how we can make sense of the legal issue of sovereignty for states that were colonies, and how this conference in 1955 tried to somehow adapt international law, maybe not changing it dramatically, but reforming it as a way to assert sovereignty in legal terms as equally as with the other European states. So a huge attempt to be part of the global governance scheme that was being brought to its shape in those days, and opening some space for these new sovereigns to also have a role in this new scheme of global governance. I do share May's questions on how we interrogate this past and how we make sense of it, thinking of the current and contemporary continuities in terms of neocolonialism and certain continuities in terms of violence, exploitation, and domination in the world today. So in a way, international law has served many purposes. It has structured colonialism in a way that it was something seen as positive. So colonialism is totally an integral part of international law, and I'm following Anthony Young's work here, a critical international lawyer with a huge third world sensibility. So in a way, we do have an attempt to inaugurate, to somehow open space to a new mode of global governance in which new sovereign states would also have their political projects and political blueprints for the world to be considered equally as in relation to other European states. But of course, this is, as international law has these issues in terms of structuring colonialism and projects of domination, this is not a neutral language. So it comes with contestation, and the way we still discuss about Bandung, it shows the many tensions and issues at stake in how we can open space for a new vision of global governance using a language that has structured violence and domination for so long. So I would say that, of course, in concrete terms, we, after the Bandung Conference, we saw the non-aligned movement, the G77, sorts of institutional arrangements and coalitions that put together these new sovereign states, third world states, trying to put forward their political projects for the world. Of course, we know that we couldn't have a huge structural change in global governance, but new possibilities have been opened and are still in operation until today. So the way we make sense of this adaptation to international law, this use of sovereignty as a legal concept, and the contested possibilities that are related to this, and I'm saying here, I'm thinking of how this third world states also continued projects of oppression internally in their own new independent states. So we are dealing with new possibilities, new forms of contested possibilities, having international law as such a huge part of this these new projects. And it has, of course, opened space, especially in the UN structure in terms of a new international, huge international organization. But I think we still can question how far we have been able to open new structures of global governance. And I do think the struggle continues. So we have new sovereigns and a huge amount of new states, and the centrality of international law with all its limitations and potentials that we are still interrogating it. So I would just stop here for the moment.
Thank you, Fabia, for this fantastic offering. I know you could go on and on, because the whole idea of what strikes me the most, how you been down the whole idea of international law. Many of us from the global south, we feel that the international law only applies to us when it serves the purpose of the most powerful actors, but not serving the purpose of equity and equality among sovereign nations. And I love how you underscore we should reconsider the tension that existed between respecting the national sovereignty, but at the same time attuned to the hostility and oppression that could happen within national borders, and how reimagining that new international order can think about those tensions and deal with them, rather than what we've been living through when the powerful nation has the capacity, quote unquote, to protect or to intervene or to invade, while they committed themselves atrocity, immense atrocity that nobody can challenge them. So now let me use that as a kind of good segue to May. May, giving all what's been said so far, so many in the global south, many people in the global south, actually many intellectuals that we all read and engage with, they always keep emphasizing that South-South relation is the best ingredient actually to bring the legacy and the attempts of people come before us to the fore to imagine a different world. But my question to you, what do we need now to engage the people of the global south for themselves to realize the benefits of working with each other, South-South? Like oftentimes, countries of the South, because of still colonial mindset led, as we discuss, keep the relationship between rather North-South rather than South-South. So any take on that?
Yes. I mean, this is, of course, a very difficult question, right? Because it's hard for me to say, oh, these are the set of issues that we should work on. But I mean, I have some intuitions that also involve some of this kind of critical history approach to the Bandung moment. So creating the space for South-South relations, I think, is absolutely important. And I think people have been doing that in different forms historically. Different phases, like the Bandung phase, was quite pronounced. But I think people's struggles have also tried to do that over time. And kind of as I was mentioning before, I think the first step is not to romanticize Bandung, but to learn from it. And precisely, I'm thinking of this in light of what Fabia was just saying about thinking of oppression within post-colonial nation states themselves. And obviously, we know that in this current historical moment. And perhaps ask the question of what happened to these revolutionary movements when they took the form of the post-colonial state, or what happened to these struggles when they were reformulated under a right to self-determination in international law, as Fabio was saying, a discipline that is already, constructed through the colonial encounter, even though it was occupied by the global south in different forms. So self-determination did bring a counter-hegemonic flair to international law, but it was through a global anti-colonial and largely a global south movement that was birthed by the newly independent states. So the UN General Assembly at the time was forced to reckon with colonialism through a right to self-determination. And it's important to remember that the only reason we saw those changes in international law is because this period witnessed these forms of international solidarity made possible by those newly independent states before they fell deep into what Fanon has called the pitfalls of national consciousness, black skin, white masks, co-optation by capital, and ultimately descended into dictatorships. Self-determination was eventually constructed through a very statist understanding of liberation, the outcome of which we see, as I mentioned, in kind of the nightmare of the post-colonial state. If anyone has lived in a post-colony, they would know what I'm talking about. And we already see it in the Palestinian Authority, for example, now, and the defunct two-state solution of the Oslo regime. And what I mean by this is that it is also important to remember that the history of Bandung and the period of decolonization more generally is fraught with tensions and contradictions. And our task is not to shy away from those, but to try to work through them. And I think, I mean, not to be doom and gloom, but I do think there is a space for struggle today. And I think we work through those contradictions of the past and the present in organizing spaces in trade unions and social movements. And again, I think struggles like the Palestinian struggle are doing a lot of that work for us now. Look at the kind of organizing this struggle has generated globally. Just last week, 1 million people took to the streets in Pakistan in solidarity with Palestine. Moroccan workers only 2 days ago stopped a weapons shipment that was heading to Israel. The Arab and global boycott of Israeli commodities has been reignited. And all of this is to say that South-South solidarity is built in struggle and not exchanged in the way one would exchange commodities in the market. It operates outside of that logic of exchange, or as Robin Kelly has astutely put it, solidarity is not a market exchange. But this enactment of a critical struggle that is conscious of the fact that the structures of oppression and exploitation today are historically connected, and that the Sudanese or the Palestinian or the Congolese liberation is some form of liberation for us all. And I know like this sounds like a slogan, but it really is not a slogan. It's a historical consciousness of the vastness and the totalizing reach of colonial capitalism. And so the resistance to it would have to also take that kind of broader reach as well. A particular movement in the global south or elsewhere cannot simply secede or opt out of this global regime. They could kind of disrupt it, challenge it, subvert it, but ultimately we would need something more universal. When Andreas Malm says the destruction of Palestine is the destruction of the earth, he's not saying it metaphorically. Organizing around global South struggles challenges the current order of colonial capitalism that is relentlessly marching forwards towards the destruction of the planet. And anyone who has been part of a movement would very quickly realize that struggles are connected. I remember during the war on Iraq in 2003 and the war on Lebanon in 2006, Tahrir Square in Cairo, where I grew up, was occupied by demonstrators who would start their demonstrations with anti-war protests and organically move to rising prices and the conditions of the working class, state repression, and then go back to protesting the war, like an organic loop that people kind of logically connect because they experience it as such. So people very easily make those connections. That's why it's easy for us to understand repression of pro-Palestine protests today, because states know that it starts with Palestine, but it would very quickly turn against them. I'll stop here.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, May. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I remember I was reading a lot about, you know, the epistemology of the South. Is the only way you can find it actually and use it as a tools for internal struggle is understanding and find it within the struggle itself. And I'm fascinated, and I would love to hear more maybe in other times about how this idea we need more for the universal or the global kind of direction or North Star in order to build South-South relation on a internationalism and solidarity rather than just merely trading on commodity, which we have now and being pushed. So with that, let me turn to you again, Fabia, before I go later to Weldon. So Fabia, given today's reality, this reality we have, including everything we see, including the BRICS Plus and etc., or international law, how do you see the possibility of the Bandung legacy influencing tomorrow the architecture of world making? With all this, not doom and gloom, but can this legacy actually influeing?
Thank you, Sadiq. Well, I was just taking a look at Sandhya Pahuja's chapter on a book called Who's Afraid of International Law? And I love a certain passage in which she says, third world people's states, we cannot just get rid of international law. Like, we have to deal with international law, otherwise international law will kind of have its effects upon us in ways that so I mean there is no escape in thinking together with Sandhya in these lines. So despite all tensions, contradictions, and limitation of this vocabulary, of the international legal vocabulary, in a way, this is a space, a site of struggle for us to think and to reimagine political possibilities. So it's a vocabulary that opens spaces for us. And I'm totally with May to critically interrogate the past in a way that we can re-articulate emancipatory possibilities, maybe more aware of the limits, the tactics, the strategics of articulating this vocabulary. So at least in the way I've been thinking about these issues, because of course, being an international lawyer is really frustrating. Now, in a way, the limits of what we can achieve in terms of concrete changes in the world, I cannot put all my chips on international law, but still, it's a very useful vocabulary to help us to see things, distributional issues of material, immaterial goods in the world, how we can make sense of these issues, and maybe open space for formulating, for enacting, for actually saying our contemporary demands in terms of global politics. So it's a very useful vocabulary in a way for us to describe problems and maybe imagine solutions. And of course, under a critical sensibility towards past uses of international law. So for sure, the Bandung legacy as this very concrete project in terms of a new international legal order with new sovereign states helps us to keep reimagining and keep the struggles in terms of new possibilities, new universalisms, new perspectives for world making. So instead of, I'm not thinking in terms of concrete outcomes of the Bandung Conference, but more, and not as well, I agree with May, not just a mythical story, but, and not a romantic one, but as an experience, a past experience that somehow opens space for new questions, rethinking, a very alert state of rethinking possibilities for, as you said, the architecture of world making. So it's less in terms of outcomes, but more in terms of what we can reimagine, criticize, rethink, and keep the struggle going on.
Sorry, Sadiq, you still mute.
Oh, my bad. Thank you. Thank you. I said thank you. Thank you, Fabio, for reminding us again and again that we should use the legacy of Bandung without romanticizing it in order to arrive to new questions, maybe just to keep reimagining what possibilities had been opened up 70 years ago and continue today through the struggles, through being deliberate about asking the critical question about new possibilities, new universality. But now I'm very more keen interested to hear more about like what kind of things that you could see in your region that actually Bandung did. You know, for those in our audience, Bandung was, if we think about it, was state-led, but most of its legacy is movement now led. So my question to you, Weldon, what are the broad impacts of the Bandung Conference, for example, in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia, your region, regarding contemporary social political development in general?
Yeah, thank you, Sadiq, for these questions. I think these questions is important. I hope not only for others to know the Indonesian's context, but also maybe it can be used as a reflections to compare with the situations in other parts of the global South. So as a key, one of key initiators of the Bandung Conference that made significant contributions to Asian and African countries, So Indonesia's positions in the international politics of the third world has been highly regarded. So the success of Bandung further convinced Indonesia that Afro-Asian cooperations or intercontinental cooperations was a pathway to promote transformative change in the international order. In fact, in the early 1960s, Indonesia encouraged for an expansion of intercontinental cooperations from Afro-Asia to Afro-Asia Latin American solidarity, which later enabled the emergence of the Tri-Continental Conference in Havana in 1966. So the conceptions of the Global South as the reality of the unity of cooperations among Asia, Africa, and Latin America had already emerged in the 1960s, not in the 1970s, 80s or 1990s when the concept was widely popular. But the remarkable impact of Bandung on Indonesia that happened in the past and is not happening now is that Bandung and Afro-Asian solidarity provided widespread awareness that the world doesn't only belong to state leaders or statesmen, but like you said in your questions, but also to the common people. So Bandung gave Indonesians the feeling that they have a responsibility to the world. They must be actively involved in world affairs because the future of the world is determined by them as well. So this is actually the topic of my PhD thesis, exploring the involvement of Indonesians, ranging from students, writers, anti-imperialist activists, women activists, and journalists in Afro-Asian movements. So I argue from the Indonesians' experience that in the Bandung moment, world makers were not only state leaders or statesmen, but also anti-colonial and anti-imperialist activists who are little known in international history. So for Indonesia, the Bandung moment was a situation where progressive movements from the state and the people come together, complementing each other. And these situations appears different from the Bandung moment and the current situations in the global south, particularly in the Indonesian context now. And the discontinuity of the Bandung moment, not only in the context of Indonesia, but also in the third world, partly due to the events of 1965 in Indonesia that led to the fall of Sukarno and all of his supporters. So the 1965 events had a tremendous impact on the reconfigurations of both domestic and international politics. So many scholars who study Indonesia only focus to see the extraordinary impact of the 1965 events on the reconfigurations of Indonesia's domestic politics, but they fail to consider these domestic reconfigurations in relations to international politics. So the fall of Sukarno and the purge of his supporters resulted in the loss of one of the most passionate driving forces behind Bandung moment, namely Indonesia. So the fall of Sukarno was followed by the rise of the new order under Suharto authoritarian regime, which turned away from the spirit of Bandung, repressed progressive movements, and aligned more closely with the development paradigms promoted by the United States. And this shift was not unique to Indonesia, but was experienced by some of third world countries in the 1970s, leading to decline of the Bandung spirit later. And the fall of Sukarno and the fading of the Bandung moment in Indonesia have had significant impacts on Indonesia social political development today. There has been a disconnect in Indonesia's active engagement in international affairs. Moreover, we have lost the visions from the Bandung era that the responsibility to participate in international affairs is not only the duty of the state, but also the duty of civil society. So another major consequences is that Indonesia lost the will to be the one of the leading advocates for global South cooperations and how to creatively revive a common platform that could serve as a platform to bridge the global South. So I apologize if I have discussed too much the Indonesian's context in relations with the Bandung moment and the global South. And regarding Bandung's legacy for socio-political development in Southeast Asia, so Bandung demonstrated that regionalism is the path to international cooperations. So the formations of ASEAN can be seen as manifestations of this. Although we know that ASEAN clearly doesn't inherit the spirit of Bandung. And second, Bandung also inherited a model of diplomacy to ASEAN and known later as the ASEAN Way, which is a diplomatic approach characterized by mutual respect, informality, and influenced by the culture of consultations and consensus. We call it in Indonesia as musyawarah and mufakat. So that's from me.
Thank you so much, Weldon, for this wonderful tour to Southeast Asia. It's really fascinating to hear how counter-revolution, probably in the mid-1960s, and some will argue till today, counter-revolutionary continuing a rise, but especially in the case of the bloody rise of Suharto in Indonesia. I hope people get the chance maybe to look at a very recent book in the last couple of years, Jakarta Methods. So for people just to understand the scale of how counter-revolutionary actually devastated Indonesia. But despite all that, other thing I really love about what you're saying, that the idea of regionalism is very important to think about repurposing Bandung spirits. But it's also what you say, you can stay with me. As people, as movement, we have the responsibility to the world. And that also reminds me of a slogan we use around here and other parts of the world, that we should be open to work with, within, with, and again, it's the state. So the movement has to figure out a different way to have a lasting impact. So with that in mind, with similar question about the legacy of Bandung in our contemporary time, let me start this question for all of you, but let me start with you, Fabia. And let me give you more kind of space as a legal scholar. How did Bandung legacy inspire global legal reforms or approaches from the global South perspective? I know your work within third world approaches or international law. Not a lot of people actually know what that is. So maybe a quick tour about what is it and what the importance and inspiration we can draw from that in a legal context.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sadiq. Well, for me, this is actually the biggest change and the biggest transformation I have been experiencing with Bandung legacy, and actually being able to engage with a critical perspective in international law that, as I have already mentioned quickly, puts colonialism as at the core of the discipline. So colonialism structured international law in a way that we cannot just turn the page and say, okay, now this is the past, let's just start from zero now. So this is not possible. It's not possible to just think that exploitation, domination, the destruction of natural resources, this is all a matter of the past, and we have now a bright future ahead. I must say that even personally, this wasn't part of my background in my legal background in Brazil. So even though we did have Latin Americans engaging in the anti-colonial struggles, in terms of how we teach, of how we experience international law as a disciplinary field, third world approaches to international law, the Bandung Conference, those things were very much absent. And now we are starting to have a broader discussion about this. So for me, this has completely changed the way I think of international law, despite being as a Brazilian who has, of course, experienced concretely what it is to live in a country that was a former colony. We still had a very neutral account, objective account of international law. So the main perspective of third world approaches to international law is precisely to put colonialism at the heart of the discipline, and then to critically interrogate the universalism that is asserted through this vocabulary. So the Eurocentric origins of international law became much more salient when you start asking certain questions about the continuities of the colonial schemes of domination and exploitation until today. So instead of thinking that we can just turn the page and start afresh, have a fresh beginning, to see that things are also reenacted and continuities are there, and international law structures these schemes of domination. So in this sense, international law may look very much different in different places in the world. So it makes that your positionality does make a difference when you think of international law. So this critical sensibility in the discipline opens spaces for not just critical reappraisal of this historical experiences of international law, but also how we engage with the discipline today, considering this colonial continuities. So in this setting, of course, the Bandung legacy is extremely important as a way, as it was a huge possibility for opening new understandings of international law, and maybe new possibilities for reforming international law. So today we have it's a kind of a group of people thinking of international law under a critical sensibility. I also wanted to mention we have a journal, Third World Approaches to International Law Review, which is an open access publication, and we have been publishing pieces, articles, reflections, longer pieces, shorter pieces that precisely interrogates international law from different perspectives, different positionalities, criticizing this Eurocentric universalism that was somehow part of the whole endeavor of the international legal discipline. So at least in my case, it has completely transformed the way I think of international law. There is, to be honest, moments of frustration of how we can actually change stuff using this vocabulary, but also navigating these tensions, asking new questions, re-asking old questions has been a very productive endeavor. In my case, to go back to the past experience of international law in Latin America. So I, like Wilden was saying, I'm also super interested in regionalism, in regional articulations of international law. In the case of Latin America, maybe not so optimistic about the transformative possibilities of these regional understandings, but also in this contested experiences, being alert in asking and re-asking certain key questions, this stance has changed my engagement with international law, and in a very productive way. So not sure if Zadig, if this is a good overview, but also it's personal. I can't detach from my own engagement.
No, this is wonderful. I mean, one of the things that when I start to educate myself about, one of the epistemology of the South, like to get to know things in a proper way, one of the places I will go to is the third world approaches to international law, because we often think like, yes, I agree with you, not everything we can scratch it and start new, even though that's what Sukarno told us, a world anew, but that's impossible. But how the reform and maybe even the replacement could happen, and the contribution of a scholar like yourself and people come before you, legal scholar that contributed monumental and give us monumental offerings in a way in which we can rethink and approach and understanding the international law, so we could imagine what possibilities that could open with all the limitation of the law itself. But thank you, absolutely. So I just gonna say a couple of things. So I have another set of many questions, but I gonna ask Weldon and May, and I will pause after May to bring question from audience. And if there is no question from audience, I will continue with my set of questions. So back to you, Weldon. So in the same kind of spirit of the conversation with Fabia, how do you see Bandung legacy and spirit being utilized as an organizing strategy to integrate the Global South social movement today, framing everyday struggles and transforming internal and global governance system that could be equitable to all of us?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Sadiq. So, from my perspective, one of the things that makes Bandung and the Bandung moment important to contextualize as an organizing strategy in the Global South today is the possibility for people across continents to build international networks, a South-South solidarity, to jointly address national and international issues that concern them. Although in the early 1950s, many were skeptical about the possibility of establishing intercontinental cooperations between Africa and Asia, how could Asia and Africa, with their differences in cultures, traditions, language, religions, and of course, political views, come together? Bandung was finally possible to organize. Not all countries present in Bandung were actually not aligned. There were also pro-United States countries and communist countries also. However, they were still able to engage in dialogue and bridge their differences to build a shared consensus for the interests of Asian and African countries and for a broader global interests. So at that time, Asia and Africa took a stand driven by global situations that was pressing down on them, colonialism and imperialism, also the threat of nuclear weapons, which could lead their peoples into even worse conditions. And therefore, they built shared values grounded in the principles they held that could serve as common principles like national independence, sovereignty, peace, and international cooperations for their own interests and for the world. Uh, but achieving such understanding was not an easy task. Several preliminary conferences were held in Colombo and Bogor, and diplomatic interactions and visits among Asian and African countries took place, which eventually culminated in the convening of the Bandung Conference. So, drawing from the legacy and spirit of Bandung for organizing social movements in the Global South today is first and foremost, I think, that the people's movements and states of the Global South must be able to contextualize the Bandung spirit in relations to the contemporary problems of colonialism and imperialisms that they are experiencing now. What are the shared concerns that can serve as common threats to unite social movements or states across the global South today. And then after that, we must reconnect. We must reconnect the networks between Asia, Africa, and Latin America of the global South. So we need to rebuild networks across the global South, designed by the global South, and carries the aspirations of the global South in addressing national and international issues of common concern. And to this day, actually, there is no platform that brings together the countries of the global South, like Bandung, the Afro-Asian movements, or the Tricontinental, like in the past. I think this platform is crucial and can serve as collective vehicle for the global South in today's multipolar world. And of course, building such a collective cooperation is not an easy task. Given the current state of the global South, they are fragmented, and more importantly, the national leadership of some key global South countries lacks an anti-imperialist and anti-colonial visions and do not side with the interests of the poor. But yeah, we are still waiting for the global South moment. But I think solidarity must be forged. Solidarity must be forged through networking, through building friendship, getting to know one another, and negotiating greater shared interests, I think.
Thank you, Weldon, for this. I really grateful for you bringing this idea that as much as we know, as much as we are connected, but yet our movement in the global South is still fragmented. And maybe the social movement in general, transnational and trans-regional, conceded a lot to the state-led. So how we can reconfigure a way in which that we could talk to each other, to know each other's struggle, to see the common aspiration we have, hopes and challenges, and maybe that could inform us how to have the idea of internationalism that May spoke about it, and you yourself earlier, and about to repurposing, creating new tools for acting in a way that is beyond just national boundaries, and also to maybe to figure out a way to work against counter-revolutionaries, because they are marching ahead and they are planning transnationally, even if we don't want to hear that, but they do planning and they do succeed, and our movement need to think differently. So May, this is my last question, because we have a couple of questions from the audience. So the question to you in the same spirit, how do you see Bandung legacy and spirit being utilized as an organizing strategy to integrate Global South social movement today, frame everyday struggle, and also to transform the internal and global governance systems that could be equitable to all of us?
Yes, thank you for this, Sadiq. So I think the difficulty, first of all, the conditions that brought about Bandung, the historical conditions that brought about Bandung are no longer there. So the difficulty for us is to bring about the conditions that would make for perhaps a more emancipatory Bandung possible today. And that might not be in Bandung and might not involve states as the main actors, but might try to move against and beyond the current form of kind of the post-colonial condition that we live in, with all of the counter-revolutionary dimensions that you and Weldon were talking about. So for me, I think this means that we need to rethink our sites of transformative change, or indeed, as your question states, the sites of everyday struggles. Where do we look for these everyday struggles? And this is particularly to account for the changing conditions of our time. So in my own work, I find that one important site to look at is the changing sites and nature of labor, where organizing cannot be simply done through a trade union, but it has to account for the generalized form of unwaged and undervalued labor. And I think here it's important to think about social reproduction as well as the international division of labor between the global South and North. And I've specifically written about this in the context of Bandung in Egypt during the Nasser period, basically something that was a big blind spot for Bandung, which is the gender question, and more specifically the gender division of labor and social reproduction. And perhaps this kind of prefigures one of the questions from the audience around feminist political economy. So we see this, I think, manifesting today in many ways, but perhaps more intensely as Global South people continue to carry on additional burdens of work with several jobs necessary to make ends meet. And this, for women, is in addition to another full-time job at home for social reproduction, basically. So, and this is not only a question that is limited to the Global South geographically, but the Global South in the world. So, for example, when you think about migrant workers, on a typical migrant worker arriving in a receiving country, they have already passed through a life of training, education, healthcare, and other costs of social reproduction in their home country. Rafif Ziada and Adam Hanea have an excellent piece where they argue that the new country effectively outsources all this labor from the workers' home country, and workers arrive ready to expend their labor power in the market. So in that sense, capitalist economies in the global north and other receiving countries in the global south, and I'm thinking particularly of the Gulf, for example, continue to free ride and find new ways of extraction through extracting the care work put into the production of labor power, primarily, of course, in the rest of the global south. So what I'm trying to say is that these wider processes show how race, racialization, and borders are, and our very reproduction are intimately implicated. And I'm saying this to note that South-South relations are not only in the South, they're also in the global North, they're at the border, they're at the checkpoint, they're at the migrant boat. And for us to be able to channel this vastness into organizing, we have to move beyond Bandung and imagine new avenues of transformative change. It is a very difficult task, but I think people have already been doing it, and it's for us to kind of follow the lead and try to kind of bring back some of the revolutionary spirit without trying to repeat the same thing. And I think those new movements would have to, and some of them are already contending with the crisis of social reproduction, with new labor challenges, and importantly, with global ecological destruction and questions around access to food and water and food sovereignty. Thanks.
Thank you so much, May, for bringing us to this this idea of, like, I remember I've been part of a group trying to create the Bandung of the North, who account for people born of or in the South, but they live and work and maybe migrated to the North, and their migrity and their relationship with the marginalized population of the global North people and societies, like it should be counted within this struggle for reimagining, re-envisioning different tools. And I really love the idea about like how we can think about beyond Bandung and use that this idea of South-South relation could be in the context of the North itself and at the borders in particular, in order to look at all this maybe the hegemony of particular institutions that apply discriminately, but of course, with the weakest must suffer the most, like Varoufakis would say, that the people in the periphery and marginalized everywhere will suffer greatly because of those institutions. So we have very interesting questions from the audience. So let me go through, look at them. So there is a question for all of you, but there is a very particular question to you, Fabian May, and I will start with that, and I will come back to the more general questions. The question is, a member of the audience say, in revisiting Bandung, how do we bring in feminist political economy perspective, given South-South cooperation is still highly heteropatriarchal? So that's one question. I give you time to think. And to attach to that is also, is the Global South project a dangerous provocations likely to trigger punishing reaction from the current US government administration and thus increasing the intensity of othering? That's the second question attached to the first. But I will give the floor for either of you or any one of you, but preference as the audience person ask May and Fabia. But we all feminists here, so well done. You are welcome to weigh in as well.
Well, I might, if that's okay for you guys, May and Wilden. I think May has already started to mention to answer that question. So at least from, I have to be super honest. No, my perspective is somehow limited to the role of international law and how we can navigate these issues using or somehow having international law as this context. So in a way, of course, this has to do with going into different experiences of people who have used this vocabulary and the different perspectives instead of going for the usual suspects or even the authors that we read, the people that we cite, who we are, what kind of scholarly work we are mobilizing. So this is feminist perspectives, also issues related to race, as May was saying, how we can bring a different picture in terms of understanding the mobilization of this legal vocabulary. So this is key. And of course, it will bring, this is not my particular field now of studies. Going into the Latin American past practice of international law, I was able to find white male scholars as my main sources of legal ideas. So it has been clear that we have to definitely bring different perspectives on issues related to violence, exploitation, and all this dispossession that we have been witnessing in the world. So it is very much needed, and something that I was mentioning about the positionalities and going into a more detailed instead of an neutral objective account of these uses of the legal vocabulary. So in terms of the dangerous provocation of the Global South, I mean, I think we have been experiencing dispossession and exploitation as former colonies, and not just geographically speaking, but also the peoples of the Global South have been experiencing this for so long. So of course, we are in a very crucial moment of a counter revolutionary moment, as you guys have mentioned. But I don't think it's for us to quiet down and just be obedient to this context, despite the tough reactions that we are experiencing. And I just wanted to comment, Elsa Dig, we are, peoples from the Global South are so central to this co-designing and co-creation of the future of world making. Now, in a way, we are in a world of a climate emergency, a huge concentration of wealthy in the hands of a few people. So we are the ones who can actually rethink properly in concrete terms of how we can imagine a different future for us. So I think we are very well positioned to criticize and to ask the tough questions that have to be asked instead of just staying quiet.
Thank you, Fabia. We are the ones who've been waiting for. So because we just tight time, so May and Weldon, maybe 1 minute or so to wrap it up in any of those questions that come to mind about the role of BRICS or feminist perspective, or staying quiet versus doing something different. I start with you, May.
I guess because we have so little time, I had already kind of started the feminist conversation, so maybe I'll give the time to Wilden if you want to have some last remarks.
Thank you, May. Wilden?
Yeah, perhaps I will address questions about BRICS. In my perspective, BRICS can indeed be used in some ways as a path to forge such cooperations. Because China's One Belt, One Road initiative has connected not only China and the Global South, but in fact also the Global South itself. At least there is an alternative to economic order designed by the Global North towards an effort to create a more equitable economic order. Although some BRICS members are Global South countries, but BRICS is not Global South platform designed by the Global South, nor it is a meeting place for the entire Global South to bring forward aspirations that are more comprehensive, not only in the economic aspects, but also in politics, culture, and one of the overlooking issues on the environmental issues. So BRICS can serve as a pathway to bridge social cooperations, which currently lacks its own platforms, as was the case during the Bandung era. However, the existence of BRICS should remind us that participating in reshaping the global order is also a responsibility of the Global South, not only the new power in the today multipolar world, but also the responsibility of the Global South as the collective group with the largest populations in the world, but one has yet to show its true potential. That's my address, Sadiq, on that BRICS question.
Thank you so much, Weldon, May, Fabio, for this wonderful conversation. I know we are 2 minutes past the time. Thank you so much. Thank you, our audience. I will bring in Basim, my guest, to take us home. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. This was such a wonderful conversation. I'm just going to take one more minute to wrap us up and close us out. And one phrase that really stuck with me, which was when Wilden shared, speaking about the Bandung Conference as the human race speaking. And I feel like that just speaks to the heartbeat of the past and the present and how significant this convening and conference was. So thank you, Fabia, May, Wilden, and Sadiq for spending this time with us and for centering the spirit of the Bandung Conference and the importance and relevance of its political vision and struggle today, and what lessons we can draw from it to build global solidarity, South-South solidarity, to inform international law, and to ultimately reimagine and bring forth transformative change in our times today and to build a better world for everyone and everything. So thank you all so much. This is being recorded and will be shared on the Othering and Belonging Institute's website, as well as on the Global South Lab website, so it can be accessed and shared there. And before we close, I just want to share one event that we have, an upcoming event on May 6th at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is the last webinar and the third webinar in the Arab Woman and Feminist Visions for Equity and Belonging webinar series, which was the inaugural series and project for the Global South Lab. And this conversation will focus on the critical role and leadership of Arab women and feminists in the struggle for sustainable development, climate justice, land rights, food justice, and sovereignty in the Arab region. So we hope you can join us there at that event again on May 6th at 9 a.m. And thank you again for joining.